Her hand was already in my daughter's medical cooler when I caught her. The insulin vial glinted in the sunlight as she slipped it into her purse like it was contraband. I lunged forward. "That's my daughter's medicine. She needs it to live." Karen didn't flinch. She actually smiled. HOA rules. No unauthorized drugs stored on community property. Behind me, my little girl swayed, pale and sweating, her blood sugar plummeting. That's when I realized this wasn't just harassment. This was life or death. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. I never wanted to be in a war with my neighbors. All I wanted was a safe place to raise my daughter, a home where she could play outside without me hovering over her shoulder, a street where I knew the faces around me. That's why we bought this house. A little two-story with a yard big enough for a swing set, in a quiet cul-de-sac, where the loudest thing at night should have been the crickets. But life doesn't always play out the way you expect. And when your child has type 1 diabetes, quiet is never guaranteed. Every day is a balancing act. Meals measured, blood sugar checked, insulin tracked, one slip, one missed dose, and the consequences can be catastrophic. As her dad, I learned to live on edge. As a paramedic, I already knew how fragile a heartbeat could be. Put those two together, and you get me. A man who does not take risks when it comes to his daughter's health. My daughter Emily is 10 years old. She's brave, funny, and tougher than most adults I know. She's had to be. By the time she was 6, she already knew how to prick her finger, test her glucose, and tell me if she was feeling the crash coming on. At school, she's the girl with the pink lunchbox and the cooler bag, the one who has to sit out when cake gets passed around at birthday parties. I watch her handle it all with a courage that breaks my heart and inspires me at the same time. And that's why I fight. Because this house isn't just drywall and a mortgage. It's the one stable place Emily has, where her friends come over, where she feels normal, where I can control the things that life keeps trying to take away from her. Home is supposed to be safe. But when we moved into this neighborhood, I learned that safety wasn't just about locks on doors. It was about who holds power outside those doors. I've been a paramedic for 15 years. That means I've walked into chaos more times than I can count. Car crashes at 2 a.m., where the smell of gasoline clings to your clothes. Overdoses where the silence in the room is heavier than the sirens outside. Domestic calls where you can see the story in someone's eyes before they even open their mouth. My job is to face fear head-on and bring calm into the storm. I thought that training would be enough for anything, but nothing prepares you for watching your own child suffer because someone else decided to play God with her medication. See, I know the weight of an insulin vial. I know how many units my daughter needs before bed. I know how long we can last if something gets delayed or ruined. Most people see medicine as just a bottle on the shelf. For me, it's a countdown clock, one that resets every morning and every night. And that's where the HOA comes in. Our homeowners association was supposed to be a formality: lawn height, trash bins, parking permits, the usual petty stuff. I figured I'd pay the dues, smile at the meetings, and be left alone. What I didn't count on was Karen. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was the board president, the self-appointed queen of our street. She was the kind of person who walked around with a clipboard, measuring tape in hand, just waiting to write someone up for a bush-trimmed half an inch too high. At first, it was laughable. Then it became irritating, but eventually it became dangerous. Because Karen had decided that our cooler, the one I keep on the porch in a shaded locked case for emergency insulin storage, violated aesthetic standards. She didn't care that it held life-saving medication. To her, it was just unsightly. That's when I knew this wasn't just about lawn ornaments or paint colors. This was about control, about power. And in her mind, nothing and no one was exempt, not even a sick child. My life has taught me to fight for people when they can't fight for themselves. I've done it for strangers in ambulances, and I'll do it for my daughter in our own neighborhood. Because I'm not just a dad. I'm a protector, a fighter, and someone who knows exactly what it looks like when a life is on the line. And right now, the person threatening my daughter's life isn't some faceless danger out in the world. It's the woman living 3 houses down, hiding behind the letters HOA. That's who I am. That's why I fight. From the day we moved in, Karen had her eyes on us. At first, I thought it was just nosy neighbor curiosity. She'd linger on the sidewalk when we unloaded groceries, jot something down in her little black notebook when my daughter's friends rode bikes in the cul-de-sac. Her smile was polite, but it never reached her eyes. It didn't take long before the notices started showing up in my mailbox. The first one? A warning about the color of our mailbox flag. Ours was a standard red, the kind you buy at the hardware store. According to Karen, it was too bright and disrupted the uniform aesthetic. I laughed it off until I realized she was dead serious. The second notice came when Emily left her scooter leaning against the porch overnight. Unsecured recreational equipment, the letter said. A $5 toy, suddenly transformed into a violation. The third was even more absurd. My grass. She claimed it was a quarter-inch higher than approved HOA standards. I measured it myself. She was wrong. But arguing with her was like arguing with a wall made of rules she twisted to suit her mood. It wasn't just us either. Karen's power trip extended across the whole neighborhood. Mr. Jenkins, the retired veteran down the street, got fined because his American flag was too large. A single mom, Tanya, was written up for having non-conforming plants in her front garden. Sunflowers her daughter had planted for a school project. Another family got a citation because their kids drew chalk art on the sidewalk. But here's the thing. Karen wasn't random. She was selective. She didn't go after everyone equally. She went after people she thought were weak, people who couldn't or wouldn't fight back. Older couples, young parents, anyone who couldn't afford the endless fines. And if you tried to stand up to her, she escalated. I'll never forget the day I saw her pacing in front of Tanya's house, phone to her ear, snapping pictures of the garden while loudly announcing she was filing a complaint with county code enforcement. Tanya stood on her porch, red-faced and humiliated, clutching her little girl's hand. Karen didn't care. She wanted dominance, and she got it by grinding people down one petty rule at a time. But her real obsession was with me. It started small. She'd stop me in the driveway to comment on how cluttered my garage looked when the door was open. She'd question whether my medical cooler on the porch was properly secured. She even asked me, point blank, if I had a permit for the shade tent I set up so Emily could play outside without overheating. Every time she spoke, it felt less like a question and more like an accusation. I started keeping track. Dates, times, what she said, what she did. And I noticed a pattern. Every incident happened when Emily was present, when my daughter was outside, when her medical supplies were visible, when her condition was obvious. Karen wasn't just harassing us, she was targeting us, targeting Emily. And the part that chilled me most, she knew exactly what she was doing. One evening, after Emily had a rough day with her blood sugar, I sat with her on the porch while she sipped juice and waited for her levels to climb back up. Karen walked by, slow as ever, clipboard under her arm. She stopped, glanced at the cooler, then at my daughter's pale face. And she smiled. Not a kind smile, a cruel one. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about the HOA. It wasn't about rules. This was personal. Karen wanted control, and she got off on watching people squirm. She wasn't satisfied with catching you breaking rules. She wanted to create the rules, twist them, weaponize them, and then stand over you while you suffered. Her entire personality was a pattern of control. She measured it out in violations, fines, and threats. And while most neighbors just gave in to make her go, away, I knew I couldn't. Not with Emily's life depending on that cooler, because Karen wasn't just annoying anymore. She was dangerous. And the worst part? Deep down, I had a sinking feeling that her obsession with my daughter's medication was leading to something bigger, something darker. Like a storm you can feel in the air before the clouds even gather. Karen had already crossed the line with words and citations. I just didn't realize yet how far she was willing to go. But I was about to find out. The first real hit came on a Tuesday. We were gone less than an hour. Grocery run, quick and routine. Emily held my hand in the freezer aisle, studying the popsicles like they were jewelry. She'd had a good morning, numbers steady, spirits high. I let myself breathe. When we turned onto our street, I saw the orange tag before I even parked. It screamed from our porch like a hazard flare. Emergency remediation. Order. Show compliance required. My stomach fell straight through the floor. The shaded corner where the locked medical cooler sat was empty. Gone. In its place, a square of lighter wood and a scattering of ice pellets melting into the boards. "Dad?" Emily's voice was small. "Where's the cooler?" I didn't answer. I was already out of the truck, groceries abandoned, taking the steps two at a time. The tag flapped in the warm breeze. The print was official, the signature unmistakable. Authorized by Karen, board president. Biohazard, it said. Unauthorized storage of medical substances. Immediate removal for community safety. I looked up, and there she was across the street. Blinds tilted just enough for me to see the whites of her eyes. Watching, waiting, like she'd set a trap and wanted to see if it worked. I knocked. She didn't answer. Of course she didn't. I went back to my porch and tore the tag off. My hands were shaking. Emily stood on the step behind me, hugging her pink lunchbox, trying to look brave. "I kept my vial in there," she whispered. "The one for after PE tomorrow." "We have more inside," I said, forcing calm. "You're okay?" I unlocked the door. We had backup in the fridge and more in the bedroom kit. But that cooler was our safety net for heat waves, power outages, surprise lows. It wasn't decoration. It was strategy. It was survival. Inside, I opened the fridge and counted automatically. Vials lined up like soldiers. 1, 2, 3. I felt the rhythm falter. The fourth spot was empty. The spare I'd stored last night, gone. I closed my eyes. The sound of the shelves humming filled the kitchen. "Dad?" "I'm okay," I lied. I checked the bedroom kit next. Everything there. But the missing vial from the fridge told me what I needed to know. They didn't just remove the cooler. They inventoried my home from the porch like it was a crime scene and helped themselves to whatever evidence they wanted. I pulled up the doorbell camera. On my phone, there she was, 10:31 a.m. Karen in a sun hat, latex gloves, and a clipboard. 2 men with her, the HOA's maintenance vendor. One carried bolt cutters. The other wore a company polo and the bored face of a man paid to not ask questions. The footage showed them cutting the small lock on the cooler stand. Karen lifted the lid with a flourish, peered inside as if she'd found contraband, then nodded to the man with the polo. He bagged the cooler like it was toxic and set it on a dolly. At 10:34 a.m., Karen pointed at our front door and spoke, lips exaggerated for power. The vendor stepped closer to the threshold, peered through the sidelight window, then turned back. Karen said something again and tapped her clipboard. He shrugged. She smiled. The video froze on her face. The same smile from the night on the porch. The same one that didn't reach her eyes. I saved the clip. I saved it twice. Then I called the number on the orange tag. HOA office, a bored voice answered. "This is Michael from 118. I need whoever authorized an emergency remediation at my home to get back here now. You removed life-saving medication. My daughter has type 1 diabetes. There was nothing unsafe about that cooler. You had no right. Sir, if this is about the biohazard order..." "There was no biohazard," I said. "There was insulin in a cooler, locked, shaded, and labeled. You took it, on video, put me through to the president, put me through to Karen." A pause, paper rustling. The voice returned, oiled with fake sympathy. "The board president is unavailable. You can submit an appeal in writing within 30 days. 30 days? My laugh came out sharp. "My kid doses every day." Silence. Then the line clicked. I hung up, breathing hard, and found Emily sitting at the table, elbows on her knees, eyes wet but stubborn. She had pulled out her meter, already pricking her finger with practiced calm. "Let's check," she said, like she was the adult now. We tested. She was fine, for now. But my mind ran the what-ifs like a siren. What if we'd come home to a crash? What if I'd needed that missing vial right then? What if I hadn't had backups? My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I've seen arterial bleeds in cramped bathrooms and held strangers steady as they coded in the back of my rig. But the image of those bolt cutters on my porch made my vision strobe. That night, Emily had a nightmare. I heard her pad down the hall to my room and stand there, silent, like she used to when she was little. "Can I sleep here?" she asked. "Of course." She curled up on my side of the bed. I lay awake in the dark, watching the hallway glow under the door. listening to the refrigerator hum, the AC cycle, my own breath counting seconds. My paramedic bag sat by the bedroom door, unzipped, everything ready. Glucagon, lancets, syringes, habit, muscle memory, and now a shield against neighbors. In the morning, there were 3 tickets taped to my door, one for destruction of official HOA notice, one for verbal harassment of board personnel, one for refusal to comply with emergency order. Each carried a fine. Each threatened further action, including a lien. I laughed once, short and humorless. Then I took photos of all 3 and filed them with the video. On my way to work, I stopped by Mr. Jenkins's house. He'd seen the orange tag. He'd seen the men haul away the cooler. "She stood there like a warden," he said, voice gravel thick. I told them it was medicine. "She told me to mind my business." I said, "Ma'am, you don't take a child's medicine." She looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's not a child's medicine if it's an unapproved storage device." He handed me a folded paper. "She slid this under my door after, warning me about interference." I thanked him. I added his statement to my notes, patterns, names, times. That's how you beat a storm. You map it. When I got home that evening, there was a flyer in every mailbox. Community Safety Alert. It warned of residents storing hazardous pharmaceuticals in common areas, urged neighbors to report suspicious medical activity, and included a photo of my shaded porch. The angle unmistakable, my house, my kids' setup, blurred out just enough to pretend it wasn't targeted. Emily saw the flyer in our kitchen stack and went quiet. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "Am I dangerous?" My throat closed. "You're the bravest person I know," I said. "You did nothing wrong." But the damage was done. She wouldn't sit on the porch that night. She wouldn't play in the yard. She checked the lock on the front door twice before bed, then came back to check it a 3rd time. She kept asking if we had enough insulin inside, if someone could take it again, if we should sleep in the truck just in case. I told her we were safe. I told her I had backups. I told her I had a plan. Then I started making one. I installed a 2nd camera angled at the porch and a 3rd aimed at the path from Karen's house. I moved the emergency setup inside, reorganized the fridge, labeled every vial with dates, lot numbers, and a Sharpie mark only I would recognize. I called my pharmacy and flagged our account. I notified my captain at the station of a potential harassment situation affecting a medical device. And then, because I know the shape of escalation, I called the non-emergency police line and filed a report. Removal of medical property. The officer who came out was polite and apologetic and useless. "Civil matter," he said, squinting at the orange tag. HOA stuff, mostly. "Taking a child's insulin is a civil matter?" I asked. He shifted, uncomfortable. "If you can prove a theft, that's different. But they're claiming an emergency. You've got video, and that helps. Put it in your report." I did. I filed everything. I printed copies. I burned the footage to a thumb drive and placed it in a fireproof box. And through it all, the fear settled into me like cold water. Not the jump scare kind, but the slow, heavy kind that makes your limbs feel tired. The kind that whispers, "This is only the beginning." Because people like Karen don't stop when you flinch. They press harder. The next move wouldn't be orange tags and bolt cutters. It would be something bolder, something meant to break us. And when it came, I would be ready. And filming. It happened just after midnight. Emily had finally fallen asleep after another restless evening, checking the locks, triple counting her vials, whispering questions she was too scared to ask during the day. I sat in the living room, lights low, replaying the footage of Karen and her bolt cutters for the 100th time. I should have been in bed, but something kept me awake. At 12:17 a.m., the motion alert chimed on my phone. Porch camera. I tapped the screen. The feed lit up, and my blood froze. 2 figures in dark hoodies, faces hidden, crouched by my front door. One carried a crowbar. The other had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. They weren't kids pulling pranks. They moved with purpose. Professional, almost. One kept glancing over his shoulder. The other bent low, working at the doorframe. My hands went cold. I glanced down the hall toward Emily's room. She was safe, for now. I grabbed my flashlight with one hand, my phone with the other, and dialed 911. "Two intruders," I whispered. "Front door. Trying to break in. I have a child inside. Send units now." The dispatcher's calm voice was a lifeline, but my heart thundered louder than her words. I set the phone on speaker, crept to the hallway, and pulled my daughter's bedroom door shut. On the screen, the crowbar slipped between the frame and the lock. Wood groaned. The duffel bag shifted. My porch light snapped on automatically, bathing them in yellow. That's when I saw it, the clipboard, the woman standing at the curb, Karen. She wasn't in disguise. She stood openly in the streetlight, arms folded, phone pressed to her ear, eyes fixed on my house. This wasn't a random break-in. This was orchestrated. The lock gave way with a crack that seemed to echo through my chest. The door swung inward 6 inches before the secondary chain caught. The intruder yanked once, twice, metal straining. I shouted, loud, sharp, the voice I use on accident scenes when bystanders get too close. "Police are on their way! You're on camera!" The figure with the crowbar froze, then slammed the door in frustration. The other cursed, muffled through fabric. They bolted off the porch, sprinting down the sidewalk. Karen didn't move. She just lowered her phone, glanced once at the camera above my door, and then turned on her heel, walking calmly back to her house as if she were leaving a dinner party. The chain dangled. Splinters littered the welcome mat. My daughter's door creaked as she cracked it open. "Dad?" Her voice trembled. "Back inside," I said. My throat was tight. "Stay down." Red and blue lights arrived 5 minutes later, but it felt like hours. Officers fanned out, flashlights cutting across the lawns. One took my statement while another examined the door. "Looks like an attempted forced entry," the officer said, scribbling notes. "Lucky you had that chain." "Not luck," I said, replaying the footage on my phone. "Preparation?" I showed him. The intruders, the tools, the clipboard, the board president of my HOA standing 20 feet away. His jaw tightened. "You'll want to keep a copy of that." I already had. Multiple. The officers canvassed the street, but of course, the suspects were gone. No witnesses had seen their faces. Nobody had gotten plates. But my cameras had caught enough. Their height, their build, their method, and Karen, front and center, silent, damning. By the time the patrol cars left, it was nearly 3 a.m. Emily sat at the kitchen table, hugging her knees, a blanket draped around her shoulders. I brewed hot chocolate, not because she needed sugar, but because she needed comfort. "Are they coming back?" she asked. I looked at her, at the bruised dark circles under her eyes, at the way her hands shook around the mug. "No," I lied again, but I knew the truth. Karen had crossed a line tonight. She had gone from harassing us with letters and fines to orchestrating a break-in, and people like her don't stop after their first taste of escalation. Still, she made a mistake. She'd forgotten the cameras, she'd forgotten the timestamps, she'd forgotten that when you grow up in a world of rules and power plays, you think you're untouchable. But I'd built a career on details, on timelines, on knowing exactly what happened, when, and why. That's how you save lives. That's how you build a case. I tucked Emily back into bed before dawn. Her room smelled faintly of crayons and lavender lotion, a fragile shield against the chaos outside. I sat on the edge of her bed until her breathing steadied, then returned to the living room, the broken chain still swaying on the door. I opened my laptop, inserted the thumb drive, and began compiling everything: the notices, the cooler theft, the orange tag, the flyers, and now, the break-in attempt. Every piece was another nail in the coffin of Karen's reign. She thought she'd scared us. She thought she'd broken us. But all she'd done was give me evidence. And if there's one thing I know as a paramedic, it's this: the truth always leaves a trail. This was no longer a neighborhood dispute. This was a criminal pattern. And soon, the law, real law, not Karen's twisted HOA rulebook, was going to see it. The morning after the break-in, sunlight felt different. Not warm, not comforting. It was sharp, like a spotlight exposing every weakness in my home. I walked the perimeter, phone in hand, filming everything: the splintered doorframe, the scuff marks where the crowbar bit into the wood, the chain dangling loose like a broken limb. Every detail mattered. In my line of work, you learn that documentation saves lives. Here, it would save us from being buried under lies. I started with the cameras. I pulled the porch footage, the curb footage, the hallway cam I'd installed just days before, each file labeled with date, time, and incident. The break-in was clear. The two men, the tools, Karen on her phone across the street, her face caught in 3 different angles. That was my gold, my undeniable link. But footage alone wouldn't be enough. HOA boards bury complaints under jargon. Police shuffle civil disputes into file drawers that never see daylight. I needed a chain of evidence that couldn't be ignored, so I built one. Mr. Jenkins was first. I knocked on his door at 9 a.m. He opened it slow, his cane in one hand, the other resting on the doorframe. His eyes softened when he saw me. "I saw them," he said before I even asked. Heard the wood crack. Thought about coming over, but he lifted the cane slightly. Wasn't much I could have done. "You don't need to fight them," I said. "I just need your account, what you saw, what you heard, especially Karen." He nodded, disappeared inside, and came back with a yellow notepad. He had already written it down. Times, descriptions, even the color of the duffel bag. I scanned the page, impressed. Veterans know the value of a report. "I'll back you," he said. "That woman's been running this street like it's her kingdom. Someone's got to end it, Tanya." The single mom was next. She hesitated on her porch, arms crossed. "I don't want trouble." "You already have trouble," I said gently. "Karen used your sunflowers to humiliate you. She used my daughter's cooler to put her in danger. Last night, she escalated. It won't stop here." Her eyes flicked to her daughter, who was drawing chalk hearts on the driveway. "I heard banging," Tanya admitted. "I looked out, saw the men run, and Karen. She was just standing there, like she was in charge." "That's enough," I said. "Would you put it in writing?" She bit her lip, then nodded. "If it means she leaves us alone." I compiled every HOA notice Karen had sent us. I scanned the fines, the safety alerts, the threats of liens. I printed the flyer she'd distributed with my house, blurred but unmistakable. Then I layered the timeline. Day 1, mailbox flag violation. Day 7, scooter violation. Day 14, grass height citation. Day 30, cooler removal. Day 31, missing insulin vial. Day 32, break-in attempt. A pattern of escalation, petty to dangerous, annoyance to crime. At my next shift, I pulled aside a colleague, a nurse who dealt with controlled substances and theft protocols. I showed her the missing vial. Report, "This isn't just harassment," she said flatly. "That's drug diversion. It's a federal offense. DEA would be all over this if they knew the word hit like a hammer. DEA. Karen had turned our neighborhood into her own little fiefdom, but she had no idea she'd stepped into federal territory. I asked for a signed statement about insulin handling and the dangers of theft. She gave it without hesitation. If Karen had enemies, they'd be here. I attended the next HOA board work session. Not the big meeting, just the little pre-meeting where she usually flexed unchecked. I walked in, binder under my arm, cameras rolling from the pen in my pocket. Karen's eyes narrowed instantly. "You're not scheduled on the agenda," she said. "I'm a resident," I replied, "and I'm staying." The treasurer, a nervous man named Alan, shifted in his seat. "Michael, this isn't—" "Actually, it is," I interrupted, placing a stack of notices on the table. "Because your president authorized an emergency remediation that resulted in stolen medication. I have video of her orchestrating an attempted break-in. I have witnesses. I have documentation. And I've already started the process of filing with law enforcement." Silence. Karen laughed. It was high, brittle. "This is absurd. You're fabricating nonsense to cover your own violations." I pressed a button. My phone screen lit up, replaying the footage. Karen at the curb, clipboard in hand, as the intruders worked my door. Alan leaned forward, his jaw slackened. Another board member, a quiet woman named Rosa, whispered something under her breath. Karen slammed her hand on the table. "This proves nothing. Neighbors talk on phones all the time. Not while men with crowbars break into a diabetic child's home," I said evenly. The room chilled. For the first time, I saw doubt in their eyes. Not full rebellion, not yet. But the cracks were forming. I took everything, the footage, the statements, the timeline, the medical report, to the police station. The officer at the desk raised his eyebrows when I slid the binder forward. "This isn't just a civil matter anymore," I said. "This is theft of controlled substances, endangerment of a minor, and conspiracy to commit burglary, and it's on camera." He flipped through the binder, lips tightening. "You're right. This is bigger than us." A week later, I got the call. "Mr. Carter, this is Agent Ruiz, DEA Diversion Unit. We've received your file. We're very interested in your case." The weight I'd been carrying for months shifted. Not gone, not yet. But finally, someone with real authority was listening. Karen thought she was untouchable because she hid behind rules and neighbors too scared to fight back. But she'd forgotten the truth. Rules only work if everyone agrees to follow them. And now, the cracks in her power were spreading fast. The showdown was coming, and this time, she wouldn't be able to smile her way out. The community center was packed that night. Folding chairs filled the room, neighbors shoulder to shoulder, murmuring, restless. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything feel harsher, hotter. I sat near the front, binder in my lap, thumb drive in my pocket. Emily stayed home with Tanya, safe, at least for a few hours. Karen presided at the long table, flanked by the other board members. She wore her power suit, pearls at her neck, clipboard aligned perfectly with her pen. Calm, smiling, queen of the cul-de-sac. The meeting opened as always. Roll call, old business, new business. Karen's voice was syrupy as she read from the agenda. She looked untouchable, like every other time she'd browbeaten us into silence. Then she got to item 6, community safety concerns. Her eyes flicked to me. "We've had troubling reports of residents storing hazardous materials in common areas, creating unsafe conditions for children. In one case, law enforcement was even summoned for a disturbance. We want to remind everyone—" "That's enough," I said, standing. The room quieted instantly. Dozens of eyes turned to me. My chest felt tight, but my voice carried. "You want to talk about unsafe conditions? Let's talk about what actually happened." Karen's smile tightened. "Sir, you'll have your chance during the open comment period." "This is my chance," I cut in. I pulled the binder from under my arm and dropped it on the table in front of her. The sound cracked through the silence. "You tried to frame my daughter's medication as a threat to this neighborhood. You removed our locked cooler without authority. You stole a vial of insulin. And last week you orchestrated a break-in. I have it all. In writing, in testimony, and on video." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's face went pale, then flushed crimson. "This is slander." "Let's test that." I reached into my pocket, pulled out the small projector I'd borrowed from the firehouse, and plugged in the thumb drive. The wall behind her lit up. The first clip rolled, her and her hired maintenance team cutting the lock, hauling away the cooler. Her grin frozen as she peered inside. Murmurs grew. A woman in the back whispered, "That's insulin." "That's medicine." Karen slammed her clipboard. "This is taken out of context." Context? I switched to the second clip. The break-in. 2 men, crowbar at my door. Karen in the street, phone to her ear, watching. Clear as day. The room erupted. Chairs scraped. Voices shouted. Mr. Jenkins stood with his cane, pointing. "I saw her!" I wrote it down. She stood there while they tried to smash his door. Alan, the treasurer, shifted uncomfortably. "Karen, this doesn't look good." Karen rose to her feet, trembling but defiant. "This is doctored footage, manufactured. He's trying to smear me, because he's in violation of HOA rules." Rosa, the quiet board member, spoke up for the first time. Her voice was steady. "Karen, we've all looked the other way too long. But this is criminal." The murmurs became shouts. "Endangering a child! Abuse of power! She can't run the board!" Karen raised her voice, shrill. "I am the board. Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart. You're all ungrateful." I let the last clip roll. Audio this time. Her voice captured on my doorbell mic. "It's not a child's medicine if it's an unapproved storage device." Silence. Then, like a fuse burning to its end, the room exploded. Neighbors shouted for her resignation. Some demanded she be arrested. Others simply stared at her in disgust. I leaned forward, calm now. The police have the footage. The DEA has the file. This isn't about lawns or mailboxes anymore. This is about theft of controlled substances. This is about conspiracy. This is about putting a little girl's life in danger for your power trip. Karen's mask cracked. Her voice broke. You can't prove... The whole room just saw it, I said. Alan finally spoke, voice shaky. Effective immediately, I motioned to remove Karen as board president. Pending legal investigation, hands shot up. Unanimous. Karen's chair screeched as she shoved it back. She tried to storm out, but two officers in plain clothes, who had been quietly seated in the back, rose to meet her. Karen Miller, one said, badge flashing. We need you to come with us. The gasp this time was collective. Karen froze, stammered. This is harassment. I didn't... The officers escorted her out, her pearls catching the light one last time before she disappeared into the hallway. The door slammed behind them. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, the applause started. It built, hesitant at first, then swelling until it filled the room. I sat back down, binder heavy in my lap, heart pounding. For the first time in months, I felt air in my lungs that wasn't weighted with fear. The reign of HOA Karen was over. The first morning after Karen's arrest, the air felt different. For months I had woken up to tension, checking locks, checking cameras, checking my daughter's blood sugar with the background fear that someone, somehow, was going to interfere again. But that morning, when I stepped onto the porch, the only sound was birdsong. No tags taped to my door, no flyers in the mailbox, just quiet. Emily padded out in her slippers, hair messy from sleep. She leaned against me, blinking at the sunlight. It feels safe, she said. Safe. A word I hadn't let myself believe in for months. We decided to mark the moment. That afternoon, neighbors gathered in our yard, the same neighbors who once avoided Karen's gaze, who used to whisper complaints but never dared speak them aloud. Mr. Jenkins brought his flag, Tanya brought her daughter. Others brought tools, shovels, paint. Together, we worked. We planted a young maple tree in the front yard, roots deep, branches stretching for sky. Emily dropped the first handful of soil, her small fingers patting it down gently. She looked at me and whispered, "It's going to grow here forever, right?" "Yes," I said. "Nobody can take this away from us." Then we repainted our mailbox, bright, unapologetic red, the same shade Karen once called a violation. This time, everyone cheered as the brushstrokes gleamed in the sun. Neighbors mended fences, literally and figuratively. Tanya's daughter drew chalk flowers on the sidewalk, while others added stars, suns, and hearts. No one worried about citations. For the first time, the street looked like it belonged to us, not to a dictator with a clipboard. A week later, the HOA held an emergency election. Rosa was voted president, unanimously. She stood in front of us, voice steady, promising transparency, fairness, and compassion. "This neighborhood is a community, not a prison," she said. "We will never let one person weaponize our rules again." Applause filled the room. For Emily, the change was immediate. She started riding her scooter again, leaving it on the porch without fear. She invited friends over for popsicles. At night, she stopped checking the locks 3 times before bed. And me? I slept, really slept. For the first time in what felt like years. But there was one last thing I needed to do. 2 weeks after Karen's removal, I pulled Emily outside. Together, we hung a small wooden sign on the fence. It read, "Home is where we are safe." It wasn't fancy, just words burned into wood. But every time I saw it, I remembered the fight, the fear, and the fact that we'd won. Karen's story didn't end neatly. The DEA investigation continued. Charges of controlled substance theft, conspiracy, and endangerment piled up. She'd tried to twist the narrative, to frame herself as the victim. But the footage, the witnesses, the paper trail, it was all too strong. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't need to. What mattered was that my daughter could breathe, laugh, live without fear that her lifeline could be stolen on a whim. the scars are still there. Emily sometimes asks what would have happened if we hadn't had backups. I don't lie. I tell her the truth, that some people let power rot them from the inside. And when that happens, good people have to fight back. That's what I did. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because being a parent means standing in the fire so your kid doesn't have to. Because a home isn't just four walls and a roof. It's a promise. A promise that no matter what storms rage outside, inside, you are safe. Now, when I walk down our street, I see signs of healing everywhere. Sunflowers in Tanya's garden, taller than her daughter. A fresh coat of paint on Mr. Jenkins' porch, kids laughing on. Driveways chalked with colors. The fear Karen used to feed on is gone. In its place is something stronger, community. And that's the legacy I want to leave behind. Not just for Emily, but for anyone who's ever been bullied, silenced, or made to feel powerless in their own home. Because here's the truth. HOA boards, like any system, only work if people let them be hijacked. Stand up. Speak out. Document. Fight back. You don't have to do it alone. When neighbors come together, even the most entrenched tyrant can be brought down. So, if you're listening to this, and you've ever had an HOA abuse power, remember, you're not powerless. You can fight back, and you can win. And if you've lived through something like this, I want to hear it. Subscribe now and share your HOA horror story in the comments. Because the more we tell our stories, the fewer Karens will think they can get away with it.